Hello, this is the Surviving Healthcare podcast, and I have David Kennedy on for the second time, I think, and he's going to help us with detoxification of heavy metals with his compound and Boyd Haley's compound NBMI. And David he's got a remarkable history, and he's going to tell us about his story and how he got involved with Boyd and how they are trying to change the world with the only thing that really helps for heavy metals such as gadolinium, lead, arsenic, and mercury. So, David, take it away and tell us your story. Tell us how you got involved.
It's a, I will give you history because it's been a learning experience for me. I had uh, I got 13 mercury fillings when I was age 13, and my dad put them in, and my grandfather was a dentist. He was the first Kennedy to graduate from college, and he went on a football scholarship. And but he was my babysitter a lot of the times, and give me a bunch of wax and a spatula and a Bunsen burner, and I'd make donkey carts. And I thought dentistry was just about the most fun thing there was in the world. Get to play with your hands and do stuff all day, meet different people. So anyway, I went to dental school, and they had us mixing and packing and carving and putting mercury fillings in mannequins. And that was the first time I knew I was injured. I had a quick trip to the hospital with cardiac arrhythmias, and they said, "Oh, that's idiopathic." Okay, great. Well, that's what mercury causes. So having your face in a typodont with gobs of mercury coming out is not only stupid, it's against the law. And guess who's doing it today? Every
Right,
dental school in
all
the
the dentists.
United States, every dental assistant school, every dental hygiene school. They have the ladies and men sitting there with a rubber cup polishing the amalgam. That exposes you to a lot of mercury, way above the level OSHA would allow in a factory. It's ridiculous. I went to OSHA and said, "How come you're not measuring this stuff in the offices and making them stop exposing employees?" And they said, "Well, nobody's complained." I said, "Well, that's like the highway patrol sitting around eating hot dogs and donuts and drinking coffee and waiting for somebody to complain about a speeder. Well, I'm in the back seat of this Mercedes Benz and it's going 800 miles an hour down the freeway. Come and arrest me." So, why do we have them? They should not have a job if they won't expect offices that are in the scientific literature have damaged the personnel. The dentists have all sorts of health problems, all the way from insanity to Parkinson's and ALS and MS in a much higher level than the general public. But wait a minute, the general public has mercury fillings. What would those diseases be if we didn't have any mercury fillings? Oh, well, we'd have to look back in 1800 before they started putting in teeth, and they didn't exist. Oh, goodness. Maybe mercury's responsible for a lot of the stuff we see out there. Looking around, you find that there are over 250 symptoms of mercury intoxication. And they don't end with the brain, but the brain is the one that will kill you. But, they're everything from, tremors and movements, twitches. So to make a long story short, when I was dodging the draft and joined the Navy Reserve for a good long time, they let me finish dental school, and then I served in the Navy here in San Diego. And a submarine had a depth gauge break, and all of the crew got sick. And they said, "Boy, golly, I guess mercury vapor is kind of bad." This was before EPA. And so they had me trying to get the dental offices down to 100 and parts per million mercury. Some places we could, some places we couldn't. We actually had to dispose of in the hazardous waste dump via some dental trailers because they couldn't be decontaminated. But I got an understanding that there were standards because William Rucklouse in 1973 said 1 part per million was the most you could be exposed to. Well, we were trying to get the clinics down to 100, and so then baby nearly died at 2, and they said, "Well, that 1 part per million was just an estimate, so let's roll it back to point 0.3." So you can't walk in a dental office and not be above zero point 0.3. I was in UCLA and they measured over 1,000 at one point. So, we either got something wrong in this picture. And that there is a case of denial going on in one profession, just one, and that the physicians nod and agree with them because they pretend like the dentist knows something. And the dentists are lied to by their education. Um, we had a scientific conference and insisted that the dental school send a representative. And this is at the Department of Health in Brazil. And the dental professor came and explained that he tells the students that they're using the safe kind of mercury. The room fell apart. He didn't know why, but it's a room full of toxicologists. And just like you, Robert, they said, oh, there is no safe kind of mercury. What do you? So they just lied to them. So in the process of my discovery, I was always careful with mercury. And I had a lady that said she had wanted white teeth, and I was really good at bonding. And I said, sure, have a seed. And I took out a half a dozen little mercury fillings and put in half a dozen bonded composites.
Ceramics.
And no, just a mixture of bisgma and hybrid particles, small and large, which is what we had in 1979. They got a lot better now. It has made leaps and bounds. I can fix a tooth and you won't even know it was ever touched. It's, if I'm the first guy to fix a tooth, the tooth will last your whole life, because even though the center of the tooth gets decay, if you were in a modern practice, that you take a little laser and zap that decay and then flow plastic in there, harden it, and you're out of there in 10 minutes, no anesthesia. So, you don't need to grind great big holes in teeth and stuff in toxic plugs. That's stupid. That's 200-year-old stupidity. So anyway, they're still doing it. The Indians are going to quit doing it on the reservation in 2027. And you might wonder why. Why do we have to wait 2 more years to quit doing it? Because they quit it in 2025 in Europe. Europe doesn't use it anymore, and we're using it willy-nilly. Well, who uses it willy-nilly? Oh, that would be the Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, Public Health Service, and VA, and all of the welfare programs.
Have any states banned it?
Say again?
Have any states banned mercury?
The only state that's banned fluoride is Utah and Florida, and Hawaii never accepted fluoride. None of them have banned amalgam. And so I stopped using mercury in 1980 when that nice lady that had me make her teeth white came in and thanked me profusely the next year, saying that now she could eat again. And that when we sat down and did a history of what had happened to her, there was a mercury spill in her house. She didn't realize it was related to her teeth, but her husband had brought home a jar of mercury to clean his gun. And said,
Oh,
he's an investigator for the state of California, and that's how you dissolve, the stuff out of the barrel. If it's a steel barrel, it won't dissolve the steel, but it'll take the lead out of it. And anyway, she her kids knocked it over and she vacuumed it up. Well, the truth is you can't vacuum mercury. So every time she turned that vacuum on after that, she got another dose of mercury. All dental offices vacuums spew mercury terribly. So, but she found she developed MS and was real sick for a while, but she found if she stopped chewing gum, only ate cold food, only ate soft food, and drank no hot beverages, that the symptoms abated. And if she made a mistake and had something, that they came back. And so she figured out it was something in her mouth. And so once she had her mercury fillings out, it didn't make any difference whether she had cold or hot food, or she could chew gum again, and she could drink coffee or tea, because every time you take a mercury filling and expose it to the friction of chewing, it spews mercury. And so that was 1979. And so I cleaned up my office and got rid of all the mercury and said, I'm never going to touch that stuff again. Well, what happens is people come in with mercury in their teeth and they want it out. So then I had to touch a lot of it. And but we were careful. I would be in a spacesuit today, but back then we were using clothes that we threw in the laundry. I would recommend that. But OSHA requires you to put in what's called a Tyvek mercury resistant suit. And if you look around, there's about 11 dentists in the whole United States that do that. So if they're not doing that, they're going to end up like I did, which is, with a significant body burden of mercury. But anyway, I became an anti-mercury dentist, and that's what they say when they want to denigrate you. It says, "Oh, you're anti-mercury." Well, oh, that makes you pro-mercury, right? So it'd be like, I'm pro-poison, I'm anti-poison. Yeah, I'm anti-poison. And so,
So
and that
mercury is the most toxic metal that's not radioactive. Is that correct?
not only correct, it has more than 250 symptoms of mercury intoxication. And that reason what it's so toxic is because it seeps in and gets into every single process in the human body, uncurls protein, causes autoimmune disease, strips the tubulin off of nerves and causes neurofibrillar tangles. Amyloid plaque builds up in the brain because it suppresses the enzyme nephroliasin. It causes the mitochondria to die, so the neurons die, and so your brain shrivels. It's an absolutely horrible poison, and that's just the first 4 or 5 things that it does. It does 250 different things to the body.
Parkinson's and ALS and dementia.
All have to do with your brain, and mercury poisons brains. And that's, they say, well, I don't know what's causing it. You know what idiopathic means? Idiots can't figure out the pathology.
Right.
It's idiopathic. So anyway, her MS was caused by demyelination. As I said, anytime you hear the word demyelination, tubulin is myelin. And demyelination is when all the insulation falls off the neuron. So demyelinating diseases are, like you just said, ALS, Parkinson's, MS, and Alzheimer's. The myelin, for reasons that are now very clear, is it falls off the nerve. And there's a video called How Mercury Causes Neurodegeneration, showing in live action in a cell culture how an infinitesimal amount of mercury, less than you have in your brain cerebral spinal fluid if you got mercury fillings, makes the tubulin fall off nerves. So it's done. But we get denial from the people that are causing the problem. And so if you have a problem, do not consult with a dentist because it has the same problem. They just don't know it. And that all dentists are mercury poisoned. There was a study that they did over a period of a decade with vasopressin, and he measured people with dental amalgam and people without dental amalgam. And people with dental amalgam are mercury poisoned compared to people without. And
As I understand it, about 40% of the people in the U.S. have mercury amalgams.
And I think about higher than that had mercury
Yeah,
amalgams. And
yeah.
people that are classified as not having, like there was a phony baloney study of the nuns, and they said, oh, these people are mercury free. And well, how did they get to be mercury free? They didn't have any teeth. So,
And
I,
it's half the people over 60 don't have any teeth. Isn't that the story?
well, they used to. When I
Yeah.
went to school, there was a in Missouri, and that they were really big on taking teeth out. And I was considered an anti-tooth puller. I was a preventive dentist. I wanted to save them, and I know how to save them too. That's what's causing them to rot is sugar, and what's causing them to fall out is gum disease, and the gum disease is a bacteria. So you have a choice of what you stick in your mouth, and you can get rid of the bacteria. And I have a whole video on that, and how, the
My
trouble.
wife had a mouthful of abscesses and she got all her teeth pulled and replaced with ceramics, fortunately, by this genius dentist in Spain. So she's an example of that phenomenon. And she recovered from AL amyloidosis, which is universally fatal.
Excellent. The worst case of gum disease I ever saw was a young man who broke his neck when he was 17, and he came to see me when he was 34. And every tooth in his head moved when he talked.
Oh my God.
No bone around his teeth at all. I looked under a microscope, and it was full of spirochetes. And so we put him through our program and killed all the spirochetes. And he's supposed to come back for a final checkup, and I didn't see him for 7 more years. And 7 years later, he rolled back in, and I said, "Well, I wouldn't have guessed that I could see him one tooth, and he had not lost a single tooth. They were all solid. They had quit moving. All the gums were nice and tight and tucked up tight. No more pus, no more infection, no more disease in his mouth. And I said, "Oh, those caregivers that we taught you how to clean your teeth did a great job." And he said, "Oh, those ladies come through my life like a cloud through the sky. I do it myself now." And I said, "Well, you got to show me how a quadriplegic cleans his own teeth." And he did. And with an interblack toothbrush, he could grind every single speck of gook off his teeth. And we'd kill the infection, and he kept it killed. So he said, and then he said the key thing, and he said, "And I'm not swapping spit with anybody." Gum disease is an infectious disease that goes from the mother to the child and lovers to lovers. And we've even documented with DNA dogs to children.
Wow.
So, it's anyway, that dive was what part of my practice. I really love preventive dentistry.
I've got a motto, David. Lips that touch dog lips will never touch mine.
Good, good thinking, because I know what they use that mouth for. Anyway, um, as we as I went through my learning period on mercury, what landed on my desk on the exact same day was a coupon for a $25 flight to San Francisco and a flyer for a course in mercury by Murray Vimy and Mike Ziv for $50. And I said, "Well, and it was at the airport in San Francisco. And I said, "Well, round trip, $50, course, $50, and I get 8 hours of continuing education. I'm taking that course." And it just blew me away. The first scientist to prove that mercury was coming off fillings was Alfred Stock in 1926, and he used test tubes and glassware to prove that mercury was coming off his mouth. Well, that's pretty good. They got computers and gas chromatography now, but here's a guy did with test tubes. And so anyway, of course the people putting the mercury fillings in said, "Well, he doesn't know anything. He's only the head of the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Germany." And so then there, in 1957, a guy named Frickholm did a study that my dental school told me proved dental amalgam is safe. He did no safety studies, but he put radioactive fillings in people's teeth and showed that the radiation came out of their urine. Well, I don't know how you could say that proved it safe. What that proved was mercury leaking out of every filling ever done. And one guy at the end of the study, instead of having the radiation drilled out, which makes more radiation come out the urine, went and had his teeth pulled because he's getting a denture made. And that he too spewed radiation out the urine. So even just having a tooth pulled, once somebody has saturated your jaw with mercury, even just having a tooth pulled is going to make your body spew mercury. And that's probably not a good deal. So
The
anyway,
point of all this is that we've known about mercury for since the Civil War, and we've acquired progressively more knowledge. And certainly during your entire lifetime, this is well known, yet it's all been covered up by the dentists who are making money on it.
not only that, it's covered up by the Food and Drug Administration because they are part and parcel of the American Dental Association. All the members of the FDA are also members of the ADA. Wouldn't that be a conflict of interest? I think so, because they're making idiotic rules. And so this brings us to the reason I've asked to be on your podcast today. So fast forward here, that my first lecture to dental, international lecture on dental issues.
David is well known in the anti-mercury and biological dentist community, and he started a group, right?
I'm an ant. I'm an anti-mercury, anti-fluoride,
Yeah, yeah.
anti-bacterial, and anti-stupidity. So ant. And but I was at the very first meeting of the International Academy of Oral Medicine Toxicology, and that group of dentists and physicians and toxicologists have proven, and I'm using that word carefully, that mercury exits the filling, it distributes widely throughout the body, it crosses the placenta in through the blood-brain
Blood-brain barrier.
brain and into the fetus and into the brain of the fetus, and distributes widely throughout the fetus so that by the time of birth, the fetus is almost as high in mercury in its brain as the mother. So this is what we call megastupin, and that if you wanted to have a healthy baby, you would have to start not with the baby that's already been contaminated, but get all that mercury out of the mother before the new baby is conceived. And there is a way to do that. and that it's being blocked now by the same people that are
Before we
telling.
get into that, I'm just going to emphasize that is it 50% of the mercury in any given mercury filled tooth dissolves within 10 years and goes into the system in the brain? Is that the number?
And more like 25.
25% within 10
Yeah,
years,
yeah, and 25.
50 within.
They've there's not a lot of studies on that, you can imagine, but there was a dentist that took the fillings out with known age and measured them, and that basically they've lost at least 25% of the mercury, but that doesn't make them quit leaking mercury. When I was in school, the first year they taught us to put 60% mercury in there, and that it does. It's a mixture. This is what they called it, an alloy. Your dentist may still call it an alloy. It's not an alloy. If you squeeze stainless steel, nickel doesn't come off on your hand. Mercury comes off a filling when you bite on it. So that makes it a mixture. Cherry's Jubilee is you can light the alcohol on fire because it's a mixture of water and alcohol, and you put it on a hot cherry pie, and there it burns. So just exactly the same as mercury in a filling. As you heat it up, the mercury comes off. So chewing, hot brushing, hot fluids, and whatever Rose figured out was that you can't touch these things or they leak mercury, and that mercury in the vapor form was what the dentist was saying is the safe kind, because it basically won't kill you, but it goes everywhere. It ends up inside your brain, inside your heart, inside your liver, your kidneys.
So to
And
back up one more time, the only source of mercury is doctors. It's not like some of these other things like
the
lead
fish,
and,
don't forget fish.
well, I think that's a minor source, isn't it, compared
Well,
to,
it is compared to the World Health Organization with the autopsies. Again, solved that riddle because it's all the dentists always say, well, the fish got a lot of mercury. That if you autopsy somebody, the amount of mercury in their brain is proportional to the number of fillings in their teeth.
yes.
Okay, so yeah, there is mercury in fish, but there is mercury in air, there's mercury in water, but that's irrelevant compared to having your own personal smokestack in your mouth. it's, there's mercury coming out of coal-fired power plants. There's even satellites that map a band of mercury around the planet. If you ask the California fish and wildlife people what fish you can eat, there lots of the fish in California are inedible because it was a gold mining state. And I asked them if they wanted to fix that, and they said, "No, we just measure it." Oh, great! We just measure it and tell you, "Oh, this is bad fish." So anyway, but
So
no,
in theory, it's the fish that are higher in the food chain. In other words, the game fish, the big fish, like tuna, that are
so
the worst. But I think it's a minor thing compared to the amalgams.
well, you need to read Jane Hightower's book that's called The Diagnosis Mercury. Jane Hightower is an internal medicine doc at Stanford, and she kept having these people come in with ringing in their ears, and they had stutter, and they have trouble walking. And she'd go through all of the exam. They didn't have cancer, they didn't have MS, they didn't have Parkinson's, and finally came down to their diet, and they were sushi eaters. And
Really.
she went down to the Fisherman's Wharf, bought one copy of every fish down there, and sent them off to be analyzed. None of them were edible. So she contacted the FDA, and they said, "We don't measure domestic fish." Oh, great. It's like a highway
Jeez.
patrolman having donuts and coffee, waiting for you to call and say, "There's a speeder out here. We don't measure domestic fish." Oh, good.
So stay out of the sushi bar. And
Don't eat raw fish. Well, don't eat any kind of fish.
yeah,
The minnows, the sardines, the mudfish, your catfish, unless they're digging around San Diego Bay, in which case they're going to be real high in lead and copper. But the a vegetarian fish or a small fish are the ones that are safest to eat.
and
But
supplement your iodine if you don't eat fish.
well, the I would tell you to supplement your iodine every day, all day, because we're grossly overexposed to fluoride. And so the antidote to fluoride poisoning is selenium and iodine. So, everybody in this country needs iodine. It's
25 milligrams a day at a minimum. Some people recommend 50.
good.
And you can get iodoral, which is a proprietary blend, or you can iodine, or you can get iodine that's designed for radiation damage in pills that are 125 milligrams, and you can cut those into thirds or whatever you like. And those are cheap.
So anyway, what happened in 1999, invited to lecture in Rio de Janeiro at Mercury as a Global Pollutant. Um, Basically, all the
Conference.
yeah, it's a 500 toxicologists from around the world, and at that conference, had ended up with two: a short "Hi, how are you?" and then I had a what's called a plenary, a half-hour speech. And the short one, I ended up just going exposure, intake, body burden, and accumulation in critical organs. And, not that much you can say in 15 minutes. And one of the participants was a guy named Daron, jumped up and he says, "We're doing the definitive experiment in Portugal to prove that dental amalgam is safe." Okay.
This is a horrible story.
Well, and so anyway, the 2 days later, I had the plenary speech where I went through in greater detail exposure, intake, body burden, and links to various disorders of the body, including Alzheimer's. We caused Alzheimer's in animals by making them inhale mercury vapor. So don't let them say they don't know what's causing Alzheimer's. We know what's causing Alzheimer's. So anyway, I gave that talk in the last 5 minutes. He jumped up again and said, "We're doing the definitive experiments to prove mercury fillings are safe," or he called them amalgam or silver. And so I pulled the microphone close to my chest and I channeled my mother. And I said, "You should be ashamed. Nobody here would allow their child to participate in a prospective experiment with mercury." And I got a standing ovation. And this is not an organization that claps. So anyway, he went ahead and did it. And they took orphans in Portugal and put mercury fillings in their teeth.
From a single orphanage.
It's Casapia.
Yeah.
And that they if you know anything about human experimentations, experimenting on prisoners and orphans went away in the 50s, unless you happen to be a dentist when you're out to prove the impossible. There's no way to prove mercury was safe, but they only ended up with 4 different biomarkers. They looked at blood, urine, kidney function, urine for the kidney function, and they did neurological tests on.
And this was 1980?
This 99.
99.
The National Institute of Health paid for it in 97. I think they began to plan it, and they actually treated the first patient in 2000. And the patients were between 6 to 8 years old. And so they treated them for 5 years. And then they hid the fact that every single measurement showed harm, and published 2 studies, one in the Journal of the American Dollar Association, ADA, and the American Money Association, AMA, saying mercury fillings were just fine. And freedom of information finally drugged from their grasping hands about a decade later the actual data showing that every single child that got a mercury filling started leaking albumin through its kidney, and damage to the proximal tubule. The beginning of kidney failure is damage to the proximal tubule. So they showed dramatic increase in blood level mercury and serum level mercury and urine level mercury when they put the first filling in. They didn't have to wait 5 years, but they.
And the kidney damage is characteristic also of mercury damage.
Which the kidney damage, and mercury goes to the kidney, and that's the a target organ. It goes to the heart, so it's
and the brain.
Brain, the brain symptoms are the ones that people notice. I can't remember, and I'm confused, or they
Dreamer.
get really nervous. They get all sorts of personality changes. Just
mad as a hatter was the way that felt hatters.
I know what mercury poison people act like.
Quirky personalities like me.
Well, that might be mercury. So, remember?
Maybe you, David.
Yeah, no, I know I'm mercury poisoned. I'm so thankful that Boyd Haley discovered the OSR, because it was, you don't really know. It's kind of like you don't really know you're that sick until you get well, and you say, "Oh, this is better."
My anxiety declined after I got my amalgams out, and that was only about 3 or 4 years ago.
I took out mercury fillings for 30 years, and I can't list all of the things that one guy quit eating his fingernails, brain fog, energy, happiness, depression lift, it just on and on and on and on. There's no reason at all to ever have a mercury filling put in somebody's tooth. And what's so annoying is two things, and your listeners can help us with this, that they're still putting them in. I think we should complain about that and enforce existing laws, because if we enforced existing laws, they cannot take that filling out with anybody present.
David, I got to pause it because I locked my wife out. Just give me a second.
You better go let your wife in because you'll be in deep doo.
So sorry, David. We've got a security door that if one of us died in here with that door locked, they'd need the jaws of life to open the door.
They'd put a wreath on the door and you just stay.
Yeah, that's right. Let this be
Get in there.
Anyway, sorry.
It's all right. You got to keep the wife happy. Happy wife, happy life.
Yeah, I don't know. Got to draw limits with everybody.
Try unhappy wife. You'll find out. So where were we? We were lamenting the fact that the bozos poisoned the orphans, and not only didn't tell the rest of the world, that the information came out through open records. And one of the authors, when the records were released, he rushed to the press and published his study. Original author from the entire study showed that every boy who was CPOX4 was impaired mentally, neurologically, in their brains in all 5 domains, measurably from even one filling. So this is the legacy of a horribly unethical human experiment on orphans. But what's even worse than that is that they haven't told these children, who are now 30 something, they're being poisoned by their fillings.
And they haven't taken any of them out.
They haven't taken any of them out, and the problem has continued to grow worse, although they've quit measuring it. They went away and said, it's wonderful, no problem. And the United States, US FDA is relying upon those 2 studies that we now know were fraudulent from the get-go to say dental amalgam is safe in the United States, which allows it to be used in all the military, all of the Indian service, all of the different welfare programs. The insurance companies all insist that you use the cheapest filling possible. Well, toxic plugs are cheap. So the problem continues because of that criminality of the Daron and Bellinger back in 1999. And so
those guys are still alive, aren't they?
They're still alive. This is regulated. This is the University of Washington. This is the National Institute of Health. These people have billions of dollars. There's no reason for this to go on. Stop the lie, take the fillings out, and then treat those children who are now 30 something with MBMI. Get the mercury out of their body. It's absolutely criminal that they put it in, knowing that when you put a mercury filling in, you're going to expose that person to levels of mercury that are known to cause harm. This is not debatable. It's measurable.
David and I both had mercury fillings installed, and he got his taken out in his mid-30s, but I didn't find out about it until I was in my mid-60s. So I got a little more brain mercury than Dr. Kennedy has, unfortunately.
Well,
I wish it was him and not me.
You can get the mercury out of the body if you work at it, but it's a terrible poison. That's why it gets to be the number 1 bad guy on all the toxic scales. It damages everything, but you can make it quit damaging. That's what OSR does. OSR doesn't take it out. OSR supplies 2 electrons and makes it stop being toxic. It's back to the same electron like it was in the ground, cinnabar. The ore that you dig out of the ground with the bulldozer is cinnabar, and then you heat it up and you get sulfur and mercury. And well, that mercury is forever after looking for sulfur again. Well, you know what? Our brain is sulfur. So bad.
David was a chemistry major in college. I don't know whether you have a master's or not, but he always a little above my head.
Biochemistry and physiology was their pre-med school, but it was a real good course at KU. But where I really learned my chemistry is from being a good friend with Boyd Haley. Boyd is the best chemistry teacher on the planet. In his class at the University of Kentucky, he would periodically show the students how to measure mercury. He would show that you could take fish, guppies, and put a set dental amalgam in the tank with the guppies and they'd die. And so, if the mercury filling's inert, how come the guppies die? First guy to kill stuff with a dental amalgam was a physician in Chicago, and he'd get a matchbox and a cockroach. Apparently, there were a lot of big cockroaches in the building. And so he'd go next door to the dentist and he'd give him a filling and he'd put the cockroach and the new filling in the box. And next morning, you open the box and the cockroach is dead. So if fillings will kill cockroaches, you probably don't need it 2 inches from your brain.
So David was partners with Boyd Haley, who RFK Jr. characterized as the foremost mercury toxicity expert in the world. And they put together this substance that inactivates the mercury. And it binds the mercury with covalent bonds that are 100 or 1,000 times as strong as any other kind of bond. And it becomes inactive in the body.
Instantly. Boyd did a lot of experiments showing that if you take an animal and give it the compound and then try to kill it with an injection of mercury, none of them die. And then so
the controls, of course, all died immediately.
Yeah, well, yeah. A lethal dose of mercury will kill about 1 milligram per kilogram will kill almost any animal, and so they basically showed that you couldn't kill an animal with mercury if you gave them OSR ahead of time, and the FDA called that weak evidence.
Well, how much OSR were they giving those rats? How many milligrams?
As much as they'd eat. They gave it to them by what's called gavage, where they dissolve it in corn oil or something like that and down their throat. So they had lots and lots. So
I thought they injected it intraperitoneally.
That was how he eventually did it. Is it at the end when he realized you couldn't kill a rat if you gave him the OSR ahead of time? They ran the experiment another way where they injected the rat with a lethal amount of mercury, waited 25 minutes, and then liquefied the OSR in a fluid and put it underneath a little flap of skin. They'd inject the mercury under a flap of skin on the belly, and then 25 minutes later they'd inject the antidote. And one lethal amount didn't kill any of them. Two lethal amount didn't kill any of them. At 14, 2 out of the 6 died.
14 times the lethal amount. And what does the MBMI and the OSR stand for?
It's the name of what it does and what its chemical name is. OSR stands for oxidative stress relief because it's a huge antioxidant. It sucks up the OH minus radicals. If you're out in the sun and your skin turns red, that's oxidative stress. If you took OSR, it helps that. So because that's basically damage. But it's caused by oxidation. OSR loves to pick up all that oxidation, so it does that first, and then MBMI is basically a description of what the molecule is. N1, N3 is the arms. It's a stop sign with an arm on the top right, top left, N1, N3, and one up and one down, so it's bis. Two sulfur ends on the ends of long arms, and so it's got spaghetti arms with sulfur on the end of it, and on a ball and chain, I call it. And those arms will configure themselves to fit any metal. They're
heavy metal.
They can attach to mercury, arsenic, lead, cadmium, gadolinium, uranium, thorium, barium. That they don't care. But what's interesting is that if your body is using iron, like in hemoglobin or in your mitochondria, it doesn't take it. But if the iron has been knocked loose by, say, exposure to mercury, it loves MBMI and it snaps it right up. So it doesn't take your essential minerals, it takes the unessential ones. And that's exactly what you want. And it's a perfect chelator that is stuck in what I call regulatory purgatory. Because after 2 years as a supplement, with all these glowing reports, the Food and Drug Administration, who approves mercury in teeth, told Boyd he couldn't sell it. as a supplement because it was treating diseases.
It's
Well, he
working too
said
well.
it was treating diseases. The parents said it was curing autism. Well, we can't have that because that makes the people that allowed that to occur look very guilty. So the they came up with what's called a warning letter to cease selling OSR and had to make an unapproved drug, which puts it in a situation where you can't sell it, you can't distribute it, you can't give it away, and you could be dying of mercury poisoning, and they would not give it to you. And matter of fact, that occurs because they're bound and determined to keep the solution to the problem they created out of the hands of people that recognize they're mercury poisoned.
Seems like conspiracy to me.
It's or stupidity, you think?
Yeah, I
You
don't
know,
think so.
getting doctors to wash their hands has taken 200 years. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
things move slowly, Robert. You're ready for the people to be intelligent, and sometimes it takes a little nudging to make them pay attention, and that's what I'm trying to do. So anyway, Casapia continues to this day, and because our National Institute of Health and
That's
the
the orphanage.
Administration and the American Dental Association and the American Medical Association are stuck in denial. They think that's a river in Egypt. They say, oh, mercury never hurt anybody. Well, here's your study showing it did. How come you didn't stop it when you saw that? They didn't stop it because they'd have to tell you they stopped it, wouldn't they? And they want to keep using mercury. And you would say, that's because they want to kill you. I would say it's because they're a bunch of cheap bastards that want the cheapest filling on the planet. It's, it doesn't make any sense because it's no good at all. It ruins the tooth. They break. That's anybody. Oh, I had a root canal. Well, why? Oh, my tooth broke in half. Well, what caused that? That would be the mercury filling you put in there. It's this disaster we call dentistry is because of the willy-nilly way that they grind away huge amounts of teeth. If you put a textbook perfect single surface filling in a tooth, it weakens that tooth 75%.
Wow.
Putting the filling in does not strengthen it back at all. And don't forget that mercury changes shape. So as you chew on it, it'll expand. As it gets hot, it gets bigger. As it gets cold, it gets smaller. So now you got this metal dancing around inside the tooth, expanding, contracting when you have ice cream or coffee. And pretty soon the tooth breaks apart when you're 30 or 40. And then you got to get a root canal. Then you got to get a crown, or you got to get a crown and a root canal because doing a crown usually kills the tooth anyway. It's much, much better to keep the tooth intact. Don't mutilate the darn thing so you can stick mercury in it. And so dentistry needs to change their attitude. They have a belief that putting mercury in teeth is a good thing. You need to tell them it's not a good thing. And what they need to do is to fess up and take the fillings out of the orphans of Casapia and give them OSR to make the kidneys improve. I doubt that you can fix brain. I would love to say you could, but I'm a pragmatist. I know what they're measuring. They're measuring the skin coming off the nerves. That's why the nerves don't work as well, is that they've demyelinated parts of the brain. And will that grow back? Oh, I would hope so, but I'm not that confident that you can fix long-term damage like that. They've been 25 years now. They've been exposed to this stuff. So, that's not last week. But the good news is that if you got the mercury out of the women, when they conceive, it wouldn't transfer their fetus. But the way it is now, they've loaded these ladies up with mercury. So when they conceive, that mercury departs and goes into the fetus. It's a generational poison. It goes from mother to child. The child's brain is 90% of the mother's mercury by the time it's born. You wonder why kids come out different. Well,
This 40 to 50% of the entire population has amalgams
and
now.
and 70, 80% of them had them at one time. That mercury doesn't leave. The 27 years is the half-life of mercury in the brain. So if you got a mercury filling when you were 10, when you're 37, half of it still there.
And David, you had 10, didn't you?
I,
How many? 13?
yeah.
And I had 17.
I think it's all still there.
Oh my God. You just Give me the willies.
Well, the good thing that Boyd Haley invented is OSR because it sure helps everything.
Yeah.
And
It's not cheap. David is still able to sell it as a water purifier.
yeah, here's the deal. I have um, to give a disclaimer here. Boyd had a stroke, and that's what happens when you put your foot on an old man's neck and hold him down for 15 years. But they blocked him from selling. He squirmed every way from sideways. We did 8 clinical trials and proved it was safe, and we proved that we could save rats.
They have $100 million in trials for
No,
this thing.
not that much. Or what they're anticipating that we need to spend about another 20 million. We've spent 20 million. So, and that's just to get it to the point where we can't, and there's no patent on it. It's been stuck in limbo so long that most of the patents have expired. Well, how about we get some that's off patent? Well, yeah, you can, but that's going to make you sick because it's made in China and they don't have any controls whatsoever.
Yeah.
And it goes into
It's a
so
difficult process. It takes 21 hours at the bench in a
that,
laboratory to manufacture.
that's how Boyd invented it. No, he didn't invent it. A guy named Atwood invented it, but he couldn't make it. It was he could make a thimbleful, and they tested it, and yeah, it seems to be attracted to mercury and arsenic, lead. He was looking at it for our environmental uses, and but he couldn't make it, and so basically Boyd took his graduate student under his wing, and he said, "I'll show you how to make it." And they went to the laboratory, and he showed him how to make it, and they make it by the ton now. But it costs like crazy to make a few kilograms of it.
It's expensive.
Well, it's if you have to hire
It's time
expert
consuming.
technicians
Yeah.
for 28 hours at a time and have tens of thousands of dollars of equipment. But the bottom line is, it's hard to make, and it's really good stuff. And that if everybody were to make noise that they wanted to get it, and they wanted the FDA to stop Casapia and give this to the Casapia girls and boys, then you'd have what they're insisting that we do is a phase 3 trial, which is slated to cost about $20 million. And you know what? We're broke. You're never going to see this compound. We don't got $20 million. So if you keep putting money barriers up in front of a solution, a miracle cure, you're not going to get the miracle cure. It's just as like your DMSO. They did the same thing to DMSO. They said, oh, well, that's got to be a drug.
DMSO is much farther along. DMSO has more clinical studies, real studies, than any pharma drug. It's phenomenally well studied, but they still managed to shut it off in the mid 60s. And there's only one approved use of it. And it was so well established, they couldn't deny that it didn't work for interstitial cystitis. So they do put it in bladders to treat that. But it's widely available, fortunately, and it's not expensive to make. So you can get DMSO and get all the benefits of that if you're knowledgeable enough to know how to use it.
Yeah. But my point was, why would you attack a perfectly good horse liniment? Because if you rub it on something, it makes it quit hurting. Oh, okay, that's not bad, is it?
You can take it orally too, which
Yeah,
is more powerful yet.
1,000 uses of it. It'll dissolve OSR. That's what he dissolved the OSR in order to inject it in the flap of skin. Because you couldn't. You'd have to use about a shoebox full of corn oil, so OSR will dissolve it, and so you only have to give them a small shot instead of
So
a
I
huge.
take DMSO every time I take the OSR.
Good. The anyway, that it's a strange world we live in. That we have a problem that we've created. We have a solution that has been discovered, and that we won't embrace it and say, let's do it. No, we want to have the problem, I guess. Why would we not say everybody needs to have the government provide at least a serving or two of OSR? Because it doesn't take 10 years to get the mercury out, even if it's been accumulating 10 years. The lead, it might take that long because lead is in the bone, and you got to turn the bone over in order for OSR to have a chance at it, because the OSR actually is fat soluble. It will go anywhere. It goes into the brain, goes into mitochondria, goes into the cells.
So you take this little bit of powder and it goes throughout your body and it inactivates mercury and other heavy metals.
All
My readers know about gadolinium now, and the radiologists who are poisoning their patients with this thing that only improves MRI images by about 10% in most cases. And they use this heavy metal that's it's almost like using mercury that bound with a weak chelator to create images. It's criminal.
You know,
Uh,
it's bound to EDTA, and EDTA does not form a semicovalent bond. Boyd Haley would look at it and say, from a chemistry standpoint, it's insane to put that in somebody's vein. But you've got all of the radiologists in the world running that through, not once, twice, but there was a lady in the wheelchair had a brain tumor, and she'd had over 17 gadolinium and could not get out of the wheelchair. Was it her brain tumor? No, that was gone. It was the gadolinium. She got some OSR and recovered. But Jesus, don't you know what you're doing? Apparently not. I mean, I'm sure they didn't want to kill
the
her.
radiologists don't give a damn. They're so divorced from the clinical course of their patients. They're essentially technicians. They're
They're at
not
a desk.
physicians.
Yeah, they're not treating the patient. They're at a desk looking at pictures.
Yeah, it's really sick.
So, so what are we going to do about Cassiopeia? And you're going to hear a lot more about Cassiopeia in the very near future. One of the things, we have what Derone himself said. They were doing a study to prove that mercury was safe. That's a violation of the Office of Human Research Protection because you don't do an experiment for your benefit. You're supposed to be doing it for the patient's benefit. And so anybody who knows anything about science knows that you cannot prove the null hypothesis. Amalgam's safe, amalgam's not safe. You can't do that. There's not enough. We can prove it's not safe and have, but you can't prove it is safe because that's the null hypothesis. There might be another wrinkle that we're not aware of, like mercury and lead together are much more toxic than either one alone. So you would have to have 1,000 experiments where you use different metals in combination to look for synergy and other things like that. So the bottom line is, if you didn't expose yourself to mercury by allowing somebody to inject you with mercury,
It's all
talk about
doctor caused.
the doctor-caused iatrogenic disease that in 2000, Boyd Haley testified before Congress on three different occasions about vaccines, dental amalgam, and mercury in general, and that the FDA announced that they were going to remove all the mercury from vaccines in 2004. If you were listening, you heard them say that they're removing mercury from the vaccines in 2025. Well, how come 21 years later they're claiming to remove mercury? Did they not remove it back in
No, they
2004?
left it in several vaccines, including the flu vaccine. It's
Which
sick.
they began to insist that pregnant mothers receive if they delivered a baby in the hospital, and that mercury transfers from the mother to the fetus rapidly, especially the form that they're injecting in the mother, which is thimerosal. So they were loading the baby with mercury by injecting the mother. And that's a crime that continues to this day because they haven't used up all those flu shots with mercury. And they're going to use them up, let me tell you. They're not going to throw those away. They're going to stick it in people so it can accumulate in their fetus.
So fortunately, RFK knows all this because he visited Boyd just like I did in Kentucky and learned about it at the feet of the master. So he knows all this. It's just apparently it's very difficult politically to get these things through because he's got a long list of problems to deal with.
We thank you for looking at the number of books that you've written on the subject. You can realize he's got a lot of chewing to do to chew through the
Yeah.
amount of crap that medicine and pharma have dumped on the American
And
public.
dentistry is not the worst specialty. It's the
But
second worst after pediatrics because the pediatricians inject their kids with the poisons and are paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in kickbacks to inject most of their entire practices.
I think that's actually unlawful. And I think that the pharma set that up. The American Academy of Pediatrics says that's just fine. I think they're wrong. I think somebody should sue them. I don't think there's any reason for pharma to pay your doctor to inject you with anything. To me, that's wrong. And so otherwise, I'll pay their doctor to inject them with something.
Yeah, really.
It's bad news. But but anyway, Cassiopeia continues to this day, and that I started finding mercury fillings in 1980, and they're still using 250 million new mercury fillings every year. So, yeah, they were putting in 180 million new fillings when I stopped using mercury in 1980. But 50 million is enough to spread around a fairly large group of people with new
It's
mercury.
obscene.
And so, how do we get them to quit doing that? You get them to quit doing that by insisting that they stop Cassiopeia and fix the damage to the children. If they
And
can't,
then publicize the whole thing.
I think we should publicize, like the Epstein files, exactly what they did. We have their emails. They knew what they were doing. They were aware of the problem, and they decided to lie about it. We have the documents to prove they knew what they were doing. I told Daron that he should be ashamed doing a prospective experiment with mercury. And that
Right when he announced it at the Dental Association meeting.
it was actually a toxicology meeting in Brazil. An international, it was the mercury is a global pollutant. They meet every other year in various places. The big meeting, which I didn't go to because it's too far, was the one in Minamata. The first recognized human poisoning with mercury was in Minamata, Japan, after World War II. They called it the disease of the dancing cats. And it's a little fishing village, and the cats got so they couldn't walk straight, and so they called them dancing cats. And then pretty soon the mother started having babies that were curled up and in the fetal position and couldn't uncurl, and they sent the World Health Organization there, the Karolinska Institute from Sweden, to examine and figure out what was causing all this terrible. That's awful. The pictures will make you sick. And it took them about 10 years to figure it out. But by 1955, they had determined the exact course of where the mercury was coming from, how it got into the fish, and that the rest of Japan was afraid that they might eat one of the fish out of Minamata Bay. So they put a net across the end of the bay and they allowed the fishermen to fish, but then they would get the fish and bury it, and so that no one would eat it. But that bay has now been cleaned up. The fish are now okay to eat, and but it took 50 years. And so anyway, that was the meeting that I didn't go to.
So my listeners are getting a feel for how prominent you are, David or Dr. Kennedy. I mean, he's been heads of some of these associations, and he's been a lifelong, almost lifelong advocate for getting rid of these toxins.
I have, but I wish I were more successful though. It's really frustrating. You say it up and they say it's down. Well, okay, where's your evidence that it's down? Well, I don't have to talk to you anymore. You're anti-mercury. I mean, I'm trying to ask you a question. Did you measure it? No. Do you have studies? No. They have opinions, and what's the path to hell is paved with opinions.
The thing about dentistry is that the mercury is not the worst problem. The root canals are even worse. And we don't talk about it too much, David and I, but the disease caused by root canals is remarkable. And removing root canals gets rid of all kinds of infectious diseases and other, quote, autoimmune diseases. Um, they just resolve within a few months. And my wife had 3 root canals, and her amyloidosis went away, which is unheard of. So, and we've seen that many, many times with our biological dentists that remove. Robert Gamble is the one who wrote the book on it. He wrote the book called The Garbage Collector, which you can get on Amazon. And he documents all the diseases that he's seen cured after root canals are removed. And fortunately, now we have ceramic implants, which can be used in place of the teeth, which are missing. I mean, the titanium implants cause just about as much trouble as root canals. They're terrible. They get infected. They seed bacteria to other parts of the body and the brain. You end up with spirochetes in the brain and in the heart. The coronary artery disease is largely dental uh, bacteria that came from dental appliances. That's what they call all these different horrible things that the dentists insert. So, I mean, I'm very angry at dentists. My mother was crazy. And in retrospect, I feel quite certain she had a mouthful of amalgams that she had until her death, probably root canals as well. And I mean, she deformed our family in many ways. And, I had to put up with her for 20 years. So, until I left. But I didn't realize until recently, as I thought about it, that she almost certainly had the same problem I did, which was amalgams. And she insisted that I get my crevices in my teeth filled by this crooked dentist. I didn't have cavities. I had the little crevices, and I got my teeth drilled, and the mercury was inserted, and I didn't figure it out for my entire career until I retired. And then finally, when I was 65, I got my amalgams removed, and I felt a little better, but I didn't have the relief that you'd expect because the mercury had already dissolved over the long course of its residence in my mouth. Anyway,
You know who proved that to everyone's satisfaction that root canals are toxic?
who's that?
Boyd Haley.
Really?
Yeah, when he was in graduate school, he invented a molecule called azida GTP, and he made a test that is called affinity labeling technology, where you can measure enzymes and chemical reactions inside the cell in real time, because you can turn a light on and it detonates it, so it stops the reaction, so you can measure how far it went and all that stuff. So he took this kind of technology, which I can't hardly even describe, much less do, and took a bunch of dead teeth. I think he did over 2,000 teeth that had been extracted and that had root canals, and that every single one of them, when you run it through his test, it was toxic. Some were more toxic than others, but every single one was toxic. And that when you run it through a very careful set of tests, looking, and these teeth would kill enzymatic reactions, and even after you diluted it by almost a thousand times, they still had enough oomph to stop in its tracks essential enzymatic reaction. So, that's not good to have that sitting 2 inches from your brain, killing off all the normal processes of the cells. So, anyway, that he pointed out to me that there was a study done by the endodontists, and they did root canals on some teeth. They drilled holes in others, and then in 6 weeks they extracted both the ones they drilled the hole in and the one they did the root canal in. And the root canal ones done by specialists were 4,000 pathogenic bacteria per square millimeter. Let me get rid of that. So 4,000 bacteria per square millimeter was the root canal tooth, and there were 3 to 4 bacteria per square millimeter on the tooth that had the hole drilled in it. And that when they analyzed them, they were the oral flora. So the mouth has bugs in it, and it got in the hole
Same identity, same genetics of the bacteria.
of the mouth. But the ones in the root canal teeth were entirely different. They were anaerobic pathogens. So you just build a home for all the bad guys in the world to come and dwell in your mouth and leak what's called an exotoxin into your circulation. And is it going to damage your heart? Is it going to damage your brain? Going to damage the kidney? I don't know, but I don't want it. It's not supposed to be there.
People are remarkably resilient. David actually, at a meeting, I believe that you convinced Boyd to get interested in this whole field. So it's to David's credit that NBMI or OSR, whichever one you want to call it, exists at all. And Boyd, within a year or a short period of time, he identified this compound that binds heavy metals very avidly and wraps them up so they're not toxic.
It wasn't that quick. It was he talked in 1989 at the International Academy of Oral Medicine Toxicology, organization that I'm very proud of, and explained how
David was the original founder.
one of the original 15, that there were 12 guys, the 13 guys founded it, and I came to the first meeting afterwards, but because I wasn't at the meeting where they founded it. But anyway, Boyd basically showed that root canals damage everybody that ever gets them. And then he figured out that mercury was coming out of his own teeth. I borrowed a mercury sniffer from Wayne King after he talked about mercury and Alzheimer's. He said he couldn't cause it. And Murray Famous said, well, what form of mercury did you use? He said, I used mercury chloride. And Murray said, there's a charge on mercury chloride. It would have difficulty getting in the brain. You need to use mercury vapor. And Boyd says, I don't have an animal hospital where I can do that. He said, I'm a bench chemist. I got cages and two test tubes. And Murray said, well, I work at the University of Calgary Medical Center, and we have animals galore. How many animals do you need? And that became the study Pendergast, 1997. So from 89 to 97, took 8 years to get it done. And what they did is they caused Alzheimer's in rats. They put them in a cage and made them inhale mercury vapor. And they developed all of the neurofibrillary tangles, the amyloid plaque, and anything you ever knew that happened to Alzheimer's, it happened to these rats. And that was 1997. So when they say, I don't know what's causing Alzheimer's, realize that you're not talking to somebody who's listening. You're talking to somebody stuck in denial.
Yeah.
You know what's causing Alzheimer's.
Well, I want you to describe OSR, but before we do that, I'm just going to bring up a couple of things. If you can't afford OSR or NBMI, which is the same thing, saunas help, and saunas can facilitate excretion through the sweat. And you can do, if you do 20 minutes, 5 to 7 days a week, that creates quite a excretion pathway. And the other thing that probably helps is bentonite clay, and you can take a half teaspoon of that stuff. And I have a recent post which you can search for, and you can find the different varieties that you can get, which are in theory more pure, and that binds the mercury inside your bowel. And of course, there's always a little mercury in your bowel if you're mercury toxic. And so it pulls that out and makes sure it goes out of your body. So you think those are good ideas?
Absolutely. And you know, let's talk for a second. So say you can't afford to do anything, you're just home alone and dead broke. That Magnus Nylander showed that you can make the mercury vapor quit coming off the filling by smearing it with a little egg yolk.
Egg yolk.
Egg yolk is sulfur. And so it corrodes the top of the filling and binds up the mercury. So that, remember the patient I had with MS?
Yes.
She couldn't chew on her teeth. She couldn't put hot on her teeth. She could not chew gum. And so you could add another wrinkle to that, and is that if you did have to eat a meal, that you could take a little egg yolk on your finger and smear the tops of your mercury fillings and stop them from leaking. That would cut your exposure down remarkably, because these things will continue to spew mercury for up to 90 minutes after you get them going. So a hot cup of coffee and 90 minutes later, they're just finishing spewing. Well, wait a minute, we can stop that right away. Suck on an ice cube. You know, you can cool them down. It's chemistry. So if you really are poor and can't afford to get your mercury fillings out, and you can't afford to get your good mercury chelator going through your system, anybody can take some bentonite clay and clean it out of their intestine. And by being careful on your diet, you don't eat the fish that are going to poison you. And then if you do have a meal that's hot, finish it with a cool beverage and smear a little egg yolk on top of the filling and stop them from leaking.
The other thing you can do is you can get your teeth removed and get dentures, and that will save your backside. And that's not that expensive. You can get that done at a dental school.
It can be done anywhere under a tree if you're in India.
We have Filipino dentists who specialize in that. And because the Filipinos believe in taking all a woman's teeth out when they're in their 30s. I mean, it's crazy. They've all got dentures, a lot of them.
Well,
they're good at it.
That could have been my granddad in the 1890s, because he graduated from dental school in 1898. And dentistry was all about taking teeth out. They didn't fix teeth. I mean, they didn't have anesthesia. What are you going to sit there while I grind on this tooth? No. So, yeah, you're right. There are other ways to solve the problem, but the biggest problem is when they're putting 50 million new fillings in every year, you're shoveling sand against the tide. It's not going to work.
So describe the current form that you can make the OSR available and the cost and so on. I mean, as I understand it, it's so expensive to produce that half of this horrible cost you're going to hear about from David is his cost of production currently. At scale, it could be much cheaper,
If
but
with
yeah.
help from the scaling it up with a high demand from everybody needs it, it would be no trouble at all to knock the price back down to what Boyd was selling it for. It used to sell for like nothing, and but now that it has to be made as a pharmaceutical, then it costs. It's a 22-hour process, and it costs a lot of money.
So you can't leave the lab for 22 hours.
So
You're
you need several shifts of operators
yeah,
to sit there, and they need to know what the previous person did, the previous next person does, the next person
and
does.
it's a exacting process.
It's if you could make it real easy, then the Chinese would, and they don't.
And as far as we can tell, the Chinese imitations are not any good.
It might not even be OSR. That we got a picture on the Meramed website. There's a one is OSR. If you drop it in DMSO and shake up the test tube, it's clear. There's nothing in there. You take most of the Chinese stuff, put it in the test tube, shake it up, it looks like you got cottage cheese. So what is the cottage cheese? And I don't know, but it is an OSR. And so, you're taking a guess what?
It's emerimed.com, EMERIMED. Is that right?
uh, EMERAMED is the company. Emeramide, EMERAMIDE is the generic name for the compound.
And .com?
And emeramed.com is the website, but that doesn't help you because they can't sell you anything.
Right.
They're in there. That is the company that is in the process of working night and day, trying to raise enough money to do the $20 million worth of studies that are still being demanded, even though they admit it's safe, even though they admit that the rats don't die, we still got to do millions of dollars more of studies, and people can't have it in the meantime. But so that doesn't help you at all. The other website that sells a water treatment product is Purify Water LLC. It's a limited liability corporation.
PurifyWaterLLC.com.
And you've got to sign several disclaimers. It's a PMA. It's not for human consumption, and you're not going to give it to any human being. And then you can buy some. And it's going to cost you about between $800 for about a month's worth. And
but if you buy $3,000 worth, it's $500.
You got to buy a year of it, which is 10 of those, and that costs 5,000. And
Okay.
And that's when it's on one of the convention specials when I'm in the IMT.
Yeah.
Like that. They and there are facilitators that are willing to help people that need some guidance on and how to correct the water problems and using this compound. On that website, if you want to know how Boyd Haley's graduate students and Atwood's graduate students used it, on the bottom, on the left-hand side of the page, it says more. And when you click on that, it takes you to a very large poster presentation that went through the rigor of a scientific study, where they went to, I think it was Bangladesh, and took well water that was really high in arsenic and treated it with MBMI through a percolation column. And presto, they could not detect any arsenic. They took it all out. It would do the same thing for lead. It would do the same thing for mercury. So if you want to get the heavy metals out of municipal water, and that's the next thing that Purify Water is actually applying for, is NSF Standard 60 for water purification. And so it's available for non-human consumption or experimental use, and it is going to be available for municipalities that have high arsenic because it does a great job on arsenic.
So if you have a lot of amalgams, you get them taken out first if you can, or get your teeth removed, and then you're still believe you're mercury toxic. Is it useful to take this stuff for just a couple of months if that's all you can afford?
Yeah, or one dose of it. I would turn this process around backwards though, Robert. I would say if you have any inkling of getting your mercury fillings out, that what you need to do is to get the FDA out of the way so you could take some OSR. Because remember, if we gave the rat OSR ahead of time, you cannot kill it with mercury. So you could have the worst dentist in the world take your fillings out. And I can guarantee you there's a lot of them out there that don't know beans about Chinola. And if you had enough OSR going through, you wouldn't get more poisoned. And that's what we should do for the Casapia children. We should have them loaded up on OSR and teach those dentists in Portugal how to take the fillings out.
And if you think about it, we've got a whole bunch of Cassiopeia adults in the United States. We've got 100 million people that have this stuff in their mouths that are toxic and are having symptoms of all kinds and dying of Parkinson's disease and everything else.
Yep, I understand exactly what you're saying. It doesn't quit poisoning because you say it's not a poison. It goes on forever. So we can Boyd should get a presidential medal.
Yeah.
He went in Vietnam. He survived Vietnam. He went back to graduate school. He invented a molecule that allowed scientists from all over the world to unravel the intricacies of the cellular activity, discovered mercury was the cause of Alzheimer's, and then discovered a solution to that. Why wouldn't that be worth a Nobel Prize in medicine? You discovered a way to look, found what was causing a major neurological disease. 10% of the American population will have Alzheimer's, is what they say. Well, I would like not to have Alzheimer's. So don't expose yourself to mercury, please, please, please. So,
all right. Well, is there anything else we should chat about before we sign off?
well, only philosophically, it shows you the trouble of regulating is the regulator becomes the problem after a while.
Yeah, I think you're philosophic. I think to really understand what's going on, you have to understand that they want to kill about 4/5 of us.
Yeah, but we don't want to die. So
Yeah.
like Bill Gates, I say you first.
Okay. Well, I have a hard time laughing about it, but I think there's hope. Trump knows everything that Kennedy knows, and Kennedy understands the entire thing. He's intimate with Boyd and knew all this stuff years ago when he visited Boyd, just like I did. So we'll see. We'll see if they can get it cleaned up. It's a frustrating thing. The whole thing, they're treading on the edge of a knife, and they could fall off to either side. But we'll hope for the best here.
And they're cheating and lying, and they've been caught at it. And so it's time that we do the Epstein file thing on them and show that you guys knew this back in 2001. How come you didn't stop the experiment then?
It's
How
all
come you
evolving.
continued to damage the children? How come you lied about it in 2006 so you could continue to damage us?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. The status quo. Okay, I'm ready to change the status quo.
David, thank you so much for coming on and thank you for your service. And we will supply your phone number. I guess that's what you want for
No,
people.
the website.
Go to the website.
Yeah,
Okay.
the website. Basically, it's self-explanatory. Swipe a credit card, and they'll send you some water treatment chemical.
Okay. Got it. Thanks again. I really
Well,
appreciate
thank
it.
you, Robert, and it's a pleasure to have a learned physician like you that
A learned physician.
well understands how crazy our dentist profession is.
Yeah.
I've been trying to straighten them out for 40 years, so actually 45. So anyway,
That's why I called my book Judas Dentistry.
well, well, I don't think my dad was a bad guy, but I think that the school taught him was bullshit.
Yeah.
Excuse me. They taught him incorrect information.
It's sick.
So,
Well, thanks again and we'll chat soon.
okay. You have a nice evening.
Okay. Bye.